Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is a fictional story of a young couple from North India who, with their two young daughters, came to the US as immigrants in the early 1960s. And it's written by our own Prem Sharma, who is with us today, and also author of the book Mandalay's Child, that I know some of you have heard us read before. But this is a short story that I'm reading today, and it's called The Picture Window. The young woman was seated in an old rickety wooden rocking chair, the only piece of furniture in the dingy room looking out of the small picture window. The light outside, under a heavily overcast sky, was bleak and grey. Wind-blown thin strands of sleet streamed down silently from billowing, ominous clouds above. The snow and slush-covered narrow street was cluttered with overflowing cans of garbage. Obscure pieces of trash littered the sidewalks, making them treacherous to walk on. The walls of the old buildings along the street were covered with grime and graffiti. The woman shivered a little and drew her thin woolen shawl tightly around her shoulders. In her early 30s, she was slim and dark-complexioned. Her long black hair was tied into a tight bun behind her head. Now and then, ghost-like figures emerged out of the mist at each end of the picture window, hunched over, slowly shuffling along in their heavy dark clothing, only to disappear, it seemed, at the other end of the window. Several boys suddenly appeared at one end of the window, running, screaming, tipping over garbage cans, shoving aside a hunched figure too slow to get out of their way. They reminded the woman of the wolf packs along the foothills in Punjab, India, that often raced through villages in late afternoons, terrorizing livestock and making harried mothers run and shepherd their children indoors. One of the boys stopped across the street and, turning to face the wall of a house, moved his hands haphazardly in front of his face. A deep red design with some obscure lettering appeared on the wall, the paint slowly dripping from it like droplets of fresh blood. The boy turned to the picture window and made a gesture with one hand before running away with his friends, whooping and laughing. The woman watching him didn't know if the boy's gesture had any meaning, but it had left her feeling somewhat violated, morose, and fearful. So this is the United States of America, she sighed, the golden land of opportunities to which her husband had brought the family with such high hopes. Don't go to America, Raj, his neighbors had tried to convince the young woman's husband before they had left India. You have a good job as an auto mechanic here in Ambala, as well as your family's friends and a good home. Besides, America may not be all what their movies and magazines show it to be. All of you may most likely be miserable as foreigners in a strange land, they warned, shaking their heads. There's also news of an American-supported incident called the Bay of Pigs invasion, which occurred a couple of months back and has brought the threat of war between the US and Cuba. We'll be fine, Pooja, Raj tried to reassure his wife. You've read the letter from my cousin Darshan from the city of Detroit. The company where he works makes cars and is looking to hire auto mechanics, offering good salaries. Even as a boy, I used to dream of going to this wonderful faraway land of tall buildings and abundant opportunities where any man could amass great wealth and live forever like a Maharaja. Cuba is a small island and cannot do any harm to America, which is a very powerful nation. When it was time to leave their relatives and friends, Pooja could not hold back her tears. "We'll come back to visit each year," Raj tried to console her. "Wait and see, my dear. We'll be able to bring back fancy gifts for our family members, just as my cousin Darshan and his wife did last year." Pooja, however, had a foreboding that she may never get to see their families again. They had scraped and collected every penny they could, and then they had to sell the jewelry she had received from her parents as part of her dowry, and was hoping one day to pass on to her daughters, 10-year-old Asha and 8-year-old Sonali, at the time of their wedding. They had taken a 2-day train ride to the seaport city of Bombay, and then quickly boarded a ship. A few days after leaving Bombay, they heard the shocking news on the ship's radio that Russia had shipped several nuclear missiles to Cuba as a challenge to the United States. The Americans then set up a naval blockade to prevent the Russian ships from reaching Cuba. Raj and Pooja felt concerned about the possibility of a war between the US and Russia, and wondered if this was the wrong time to migrate to the US. Although their daughters Asha and Sonali seemed to have enjoyed the voyage, Pooja had found it to be extremely long and tedious, and had been seasick much of the time. They arrived in New York on the 25th of November. They had then ridden a bus from New York and arrived in Detroit on a cold and blustery day. They were met at the bus depot by Darshan, who took them to his home in his car. The 4 days they had stayed with Darshan and his family in their home had been a suffocating nightmare for Pooja. They had finally rented a small, dingy apartment on the first floor of a broken-down 6th-floor tenement building situated in what appeared to be a seedy neighborhood. The apartment had 2 rooms, a small bathroom, and a tiny kitchen with an old gas stove and a small table with 4 chairs. Pooja had expected to see only people with very fair skins, like the one she had seen in an American cinema that her husband had taken her to see in Ambala before they left India. But to her utter surprise, she saw a large number of families with complexions considerably darker than her own, and a few others who even looked Oriental. Raj started working in the automobile factory and had the girls enrolled in a neighborhood school, even though there were only about 2 weeks left before the winter holidays were to begin. "Our daughters have to improve their English immediately," he insisted. "They need to become Americanized right away," he added. They had purchased groceries from a store a couple of blocks down the street, and Pooja cooked their meals on the old gas stove. Darshan and his wife had given Asha and Sonali each a pair of boots and woolen socks, which their daughters had outgrown. Each morning after an early breakfast, Pooja walked her daughters to their school, 5 blocks away, and then went to fetch them back in the afternoon. She wore the only pair of shoes she had, which were open-toed sandals, and her feet felt frozen all the time. The boys she had seen running along in front of the picture window were often also seen milling around a street corner near the grocery store. They began teasing Pooja when she came by alone by asking, "What is that big red dot on your forehead?" Pooja would walk away fast and yet refrained from telling her husband about it, as she knew he would get very angry and go tell the boys to stop bothering her. There was nothing else for her to do all day after she had washed their clothes and cooked their meals, but to sit on the rocking chair in the front room and gaze out of the picture window. The winter's cold chilled her bones, and she felt miserable and lonely, deafened by the silence around her. Oh, how she missed the warmth of the sizzling Punjab sun and the din of auto rickshaws, cars, bicycle bells, street vendors, and barking dogs. And then there was always the laughter of children playing hopscotch and flying bright-colored kites. She would close her eyes and imagine herself back in Ambala. She could smell the dust in the air and her own sweat and the aroma of naans baking in outdoor ovens. On the last day before Christmas vacation, when she went to fetch the girls back from school, the boys accosted her as soon as she approached the street corner near the grocery store. They began teasing her, running around her like a pack of wolves, yelling obscenities and trying to pull away the shawl covering her head and shoulders. One of the boys then grabbed her by the waist. Pooja was able to shove him off, and her heart pounding, she ran into the grocery store. The owner called the police, and then, much to Pooja's relief, he picked up a baseball bat and walked her to the school. Asha and Sonali came running toward their mother. Pooja smiled and hugged them, trying to calm down her own racing heart. We both had wonderful Christmas parties in our classrooms today, the girls called out excitedly. Look at these gifts our teachers gave us. We have to get a Christmas tree, Asha pleaded with their parents that evening. Yes, we must, her sister cried. Our school has beautifully decorated Christmas trees in every room, and the other children said they also have them in their homes. But we are not Christians, Pooja responded. We celebrated Diwali, our festival of lights, before leaving India, she added, turning to her husband. No, Pooja, that doesn't matter, Raj answered. If we are to become Americans, we have to observe all of their traditions. Besides, if we believe there is one God for all mankind, it shouldn't matter what name we give to festivals, as long as they are in celebration of the same God. I receive my salary today, he added. We'll go to the grocery store tomorrow and buy a Christmas tree. The girls were pleased. Pooja couldn't bring herself to remind her husband of the money they had borrowed from his cousin to pay the 1 month's rent deposit and to buy a few pots and pans. The children also needed warm clothes and school supplies, she worried. Maybe she could find work during the day when the girls were at school. But what could she do, and who would hire her? The grocery store was crowded with Christmas Eve shoppers. Pooja bought groceries for the week. The girls then pulled their parents to where green plastic trees of different sizes were piled against a wall. Raj picked a small tree and a wooden stand. This should look good by our picture window, he said. Can't we get a bigger tree? Asha pleaded. What about ornaments? Sonali moaned. We need lots of ornaments and colored lights. But there was only just enough money left to buy a little gold-colored treetop star and a small package of silver-colored tinsel. They placed the little tree in front of the picture window and put the gold star on top of it. Then they hung the tinsel from the tree's scrawny limbs. The girls were quiet, their sad little faces reflecting their disappointment. Dusk was falling and Pooja began cooking their dinner, while Asha and Sonali were playing in the front room. The girls heard a light thud. They looked up and noticed a smudge in the middle of the picture window. They ran to the window and peered out. Father, come quickly, they called out. A bird flew into our window and has fallen down in the snow. It looks hurt. There in the snow, lying very still, was a little sparrow. A tiny trickle of blood flowing from its beak had left a small red stain on the snow. "We must help it, Father," the girls pleaded. "We must bring it inside the house." Raj trudged through the snow and scooped up the bird into the palm of his hand. It did not move, though its little body felt warm. He brought it inside and placed it gently on the carpet in one corner of the front room. The girls put a saucer of water and a few breadcrumbs next to it. "It'll wake up, won't it?" they asked. "Then it can eat the bread." They ate their dinner together in the kitchen, and after some time the girls went off to sleep. "The sparrow has not stirred. It's probably dead," Raj whispered to his wife. "I'll bury it deep in the snow early tomorrow morning and tell the girls that we had let it out to go join its family." Pooja had trouble falling asleep that night. What was going to happen to them, she kept wondering. She had not told Raj about being harassed by the boys. What more hardships would they encounter? How would they manage? It was perhaps not such a good idea to have come to America. Her heart felt very heavy, and near tears she began to pray. She prayed for her husband and for their daughters, and for the little bird lying in the corner of the front room. Raj and Pooja had slept late the next morning and were awakened by the laughter and joyous shrieks of Asha and Sonali coming from the front room. The parents went to the room and saw the girls merely dancing around the small plastic tree. "Look, we have the most beautiful Christmas tree ornament," they sang. Then Pooja saw it, the little sparrow. It was in the Christmas tree, chirping merrily, flitting from one scrawny branch to another. "Yes," she said, hugging her daughters, "it is the most beautiful tree ornament anyone has probably ever seen." The skies had cleared overnight, and the front room was filled with the warmth of the bright sun streaming through the picture window. Pooja made tea and warmed milk for the girls. They sat around the tree, mesmerized, watching the little bird. There was a knock at their door. It was the lady from 2 doors down. "Welcome to America," she said with a broad smile. "Here, I brought some Christmas cookies for your girls." Then turning to Pooja, she added, "Come over to my place any morning for a cup of coffee and to chat." Then Raj's cousin stopped by. "Tomorrow is again a holiday," he said. "Come over for dinner. We've invited 2 of my associates as well as our manager from work. You'll enjoy meeting all of them. I also wanted to tell you that I got a call from a friend this morning. The Indian community has raised enough money and will soon get a temple built not far from here, and on the same street where there is a Christian church and a Jewish house of worship." "What about the threat of war between Russia and the United States?" Pooja asked Arshan. "Oh, did you not hear about it?" he answered. "An agreement was reached between the 2 countries. US agreed not to assist with any more invasions of Cuba, and the Russians have dismantled all their missiles in Cuba and have shipped them back to their own country." A short while later, there was yet another knock at the door. It was the owner of the grocery store and his wife. "I have some winter coats for your daughter," he said. "Our children have outgrown them." "I had them cleaned. We hope you'll accept them," the wife added, handing Pooja a large paper bag. "We are also looking for some part-time help in our store. Stop by and see us, should you be interested." "By the way," the husband added, "you needn't worry about the ruffians who bothered you the other day. They had also been stealing from my store. The police took them to a juvenile detention center. Citations have been issued against their parents, and they will be held responsible for any further problems. Girls, we should let the bird fly out and go home, Raj later called out. It has to go join its mother and father. Oh, can't we keep it here for just a little while longer, the girls pleaded. All right, Raj answered, laughing, just one more hour. The sun had shone brightly all day, filling the front room with its vivifying warmth. The little sparrow that had made their spirits soar had been let out and had flown away into the open. They ate their evening meal together and enjoyed the cookies their neighbor had brought for them. Before going to bed, they sat together and said their prayers. Puja thanked God for the kindness of the neighbors and of their new friends and for the ending of the threat of war with Russia. She prayed for her husband and her daughters, for their families back in India, and for the little sparrow that had helped brighten their day. She paused, and then she thanked God for bringing them to America. It's a beautiful story. Thank Prem for writing it. Thank you.